Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and the all of everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. You ready? This is your host, Miss La. Let's do this. Hello, Ignite Intimacy community. This is Miss La, Laura, your host, and I'm very excited and grateful that I finally was able to connect with this incredible woman, psychologist who's been working in the areas of kink, polyamory, transgender, and we've been trying to connect for a really long time, but because of mostly my insane schedule, we hadn't been able to get on the line together. So I've got Dulcinea Pitagora with us today, and she's a freaking powerhouse. I actually saw her speak with Dr. Jana, who was another Ignite Intimacy guest at, what is the name of the place where you spoke, Dulcinea?
Oh, you're talking about Jana's science, the sex of science?
Yes.
You know what? It's something like that, and I apologize. I'm kind of not remembering also. That's terrible. We really need to do better. Jana is amazing, obviously. She's a scientist and a sex researcher, and it's sex science social, I think it's.
Yes. I think. And what is the name of the place?
At Hacienda?
Yes.
Is that what?
The Hacienda Villa. Yeah. So
that's the intentional poly community that she's associated with. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So I had boarded a conversation with her that aired, I think, in January. And then when I moved to New York City in early February, I attended the talk and you were there. So it was awesome because I was like, yes, I finally get to meet this woman. Dr. David Lay had referred me to Michael Aaron, who then referred me to you, because he was like slamming busy with his book just coming out and all of that. And so I'm just so grateful that we finally got together.
Yeah, good for us. I'm pleased with us.
Me too. So you have quite a resume here. I just to set the stage, I want to read your bio. I don't always read my guest bios from the jump, but this is pretty powerful here, really powerful. So I'm going to share this with our audience because I want everyone to have a very clear understanding of the type of power this individual Dulcinea that we're speaking with today and who's going to be sharing with us her experiences in this space. I want you to have some insight and background on her before we really dive in here. So Dulcinea Pitagora holds a Master's of Art in Psychology from the New School for Social Research, a Master of Social Work from New York University, a Master of Education from Widener University, and is a doctoral candidate at Widener University's Clinical Sexology PhD program. Holy goddess gracious. Wow. Okay. For someone who's avoided school, cause I'm terrified of writing papers and stuff. It's ridiculous. I bow to you. Seriously.
Well, I really love it. So that's the thing. You better like it if you're going to do it.
Yeah. If you're going to do all of that, right?
Yeah.
So Dulcinea has a practice in New York City that includes individual, couples, dyads, and multi-partner therapy. Pitagora's practice is person-centered and strengths-based, focuses on self-determination and empowerment, and is LGBTQ, trans, poly, and kink affirmative. Holler! Pitagora has published articles in peer-reviewed journals and presented at conferences on the topics of alternative sexuality and gender diversity. Dulcinea also has a conference here in New York City, the Alt Sex Conference, which
Alt Sex NYC conference, and we had our second one this year.
Awesome. Yeah. So I want to talk about that and hear how it went. I was unable to attend, so I want to hear all about that and have you share that with our audience. And then Dulcinea also conducts research, lectures, and seminars pertaining to the communities we mentioned. She's the founder of ManhattanAlternative.com, an alternative lifestyle affirmative provider listing, and is a co-organizer, as we just mentioned, of the Alt Sex New York City Conference and the Sexuality Speaker Series. Pitagora is also producing and hosting Kink Doctor at kinkdoctor.com. It's a web series on the BDSM lifestyle. Wow. Dulcinea, thank you so much for creating the time to be with us on Ignite Intimacy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad we figured it out.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been wanting, like, I've had some PhDs and some folks in the psychology space on the show in the past. And it's always great because you get to approach this from a different level than someone who's just actively like in a polyamorous relationship or is, identifies as trans or something like that. It's like you're giving us like a whole other viewpoint on these topics and these important topics in this day and age. There's so much that is being uncovered for the broader public, right? Like I'm just, the first thing that comes to mind is bathrooms and, like men versus women's rooms and versus transgender and like bathrooms for everyone, right? Like New York City is one of those cities that we've had non-gender bathrooms in New York for years, like where it's just a bathroom and anyone goes in and you use it, right? So I'm curious to just kind of dive in a bit to your background. Like I want to know, and I'm sure our audience is curious about, like, where did all of this start bubbling up? Where did you start to get the inklings of curiosity in this space that led you to all of these degrees and the work that you do in the world?
Well, it's been a long journey. Right out of high school, I went to undergrad for psychology, but then I stopped because it just was not the right time for me to be in school. But I was interested. The point is, I've always been interested in psychology. So after living life for, a couple decades after that, and in between, going to, doing sex work for a long time, I came back to psychology and, finished undergrad for creative nonfiction writing and journalism, but then was working and went back to grad school eventually for psychology, and then realized that it was very important to me because by then, after exploring myself and realizing that, from my early 20s that I was kinky and not knowing how, that I was or what that even meant or what I was doing. Like sometimes you just find yourself doing things and you don't know why, right? And other people do it differently where they have a specific idea and they do a lot of research or fantasizing or, looking online before they start with people. Well, I found myself just doing kinky things with people and not knowing really what I was doing. So it kind of came from that route, and also being involved in a poly family in my 20s and not knowing that's what it was called, or at that time we didn't call it that. So, and being, identifying as bisexual back then, whereas now I identify as queer and pansexual, and gender fluid. But, so really through personal experience and all of this life experience, I came back around to psychology, and also being in therapy myself and having therapists who just didn't know what I was talking about when I would bring up these topics. Luckily, I didn't necessarily ever feel pathologized or have a negative experience with therapists, but a lot of clients that I have now come to me, and a lot of people say that they had. And that's one of the big reasons why I decided, when I came back around to, being ready for grad school and training to be a therapist and all this, that I would focus on these communities that I'm a part of to help support these communities, because it's so needed. There's so many people that just, are even afraid to go and talk to a therapist who's a person who's supposed to help them, but they're afraid to be called, to be pathologized, to be called sick or, wrong or bad, or they need to stop or, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much, I just think of my own life and experience. There's so much shame around sexuality and just like the expression of that. And I've shared this before on the podcast, but I remember when I was 12, and I don't identify as like, and I guess I've always considered myself a heterosexual woman, but since I was maybe, 10 or 11 or 12, somewhere in that range, I noticed that I would feel attracted and turned on when I would see like women in movies and bikinis and that kind of thing. And I was terrified of that. And I felt so much fear and shame and like, oh no, like that was the reaction. And so I remember talking to my twin sister about it, but she was like the only one that I expressed that to until, I mean, honestly, like there's only been a few people I've really expressed that to over the last, 30 years. I just turned 40. So, but now I'm just talking about it more openly. And, someone was asking me like, so do you identify as bi or do you what do you identify as? And I was like, I guess I haven't really given it much thought. So
sexual orientation is so much more complicated too than a lot of us really spend time thinking about. Like you say, you haven't given it much thought. We're given as children and as growing up, by media and people around us, we're given this idea of what orientation is. And like, first of all, by default, you're straight, and then this is what it means to be straight. But orientation involves so many different layers. Like it could involve being attracted to a type of a gender, like a certain gender, which is what a lot of people make an assumption, like orientation is all about like, I am this gender and I'm attracted to that gender. But there are so many different ways that you can be oriented in terms of sexual preferences or relationship style or power dynamic. And, it's totally fine. Like, for example, if you said to me, I identify as straight, but I have sex with women, or I never have sex with women, but I only ever fantasize about women, or, there's so many different ways. And like, I would be like, you say you're straight. And I believe you. And that's true. It's not, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of different, I'm not saying you are or you're not, but I'm giving an example of how we don't think about it, right?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. And it is, I mean, it's multi-layered. It is a bit complex. And then also, I mean, what do you think about having to identify as anything in particular? Like, what do you think about that conversation?
I mean, I don't think anyone has to do anything.
Yeah.
I would never say, well, like, how do you identify? And you need to know. If you don't know, you need to find out. I don't think so. And I think that, I've had a couple of clients that came in and I don't want to, age bracket or like stereotype any ages, but, some of the younger clients that have come in with, they'll say, and I'll ask them when I first meet someone, I'll say, are there any identifications or, things like that feel important for you to share with me that you want me to know about? So it's not me saying like, what are you? Who are, it's like, do you feel like it's important? And some of them will say like, I don't know. I don't really do that thing. Like I just do what feels right. And I don't, a lot of people just reject the notion of labels altogether. And maybe we're coming into a time where it's not as crucial for people to know that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
But for some people, it's very helpful and they really want to figure themselves out. And it's a matter of joining community and getting support. Maybe they don't have support already with family or friends and they need to find people that are like-minded or that understand them. So for some people, it's really important to decide whatever that identification is and to name that. And it's validating for them and makes them feel supported and included and part of a community. So that it can be super important, but it's also not necessary, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you can just live in the world and do your thing and not, I mean, whether you feel like it's putting yourself in a box or whatever, it's either like it's connecting you to certain groups or you're just like, this is who I am and I'm just living my life. Which I think is an interesting approach as well. So, kind of like coming up in the world, I mean, it sounds like you had these different like touch points for some of the areas that you work within now. Mm-hmm. What was that evolution from having these touch points into saying like, wow, this is an area that I'm really passionate about and I want to learn more about? And actually like be of service to these communities.
Mm-hmm. Well, like we were saying in the beginning, I'm a person who really is into school and academia. I took a very long break, right, to live life and to get life experience. But when I went back, I really enjoy it. I love writing. I like reading and writing and learning and talking to people and collaborating with people on projects. But I also feel really strongly about, it concerns me that people feel like they have to hide who they are, hide their sexuality, hide their gender. And it's, for a lot of people, it's a matter of safety. Even in New York City, even though it's a lot different here than other places, but there are also lots of, constantly contexts where it's not safe to be who you are. But I've been lucky in that I've always been able to surround myself with community where I feel supported and I feel safe. I have a certain amount of privilege that allows me to kind of feel safe. And so in doing that, I take advantage of that privilege I have to be more outspoken. And that's just how I've always wanted to be. I haven't always been able to be that way, but in the past several years, the more time passes, the more outspoken and just open about who I am. I keep going in that direction. And so that's in order to kind of help out, my community and help out, sort of provide an example for people I'm working with that, just to try to create that space. So that flows over into academia and work, and into research. There's that cliche that I think it sounds kind of silly, but research is me search is what they say in academia. And so the work that you do in school is often really based on what you're passionate about. And if you're going to do well in school and in work, it really helps to be working on stuff that you feel really strongly about. You're just going to do better at it. So I would always focus on what is really important to me. And that is these communities that I'm involved in. And there's not a lot of, research out there on a lot of these things. Like, only recently has there been more research on consensual non-monogamy and on BDSM and things like this. So it's a big opportunity as well. Less people are doing it. And I want to do it and can do it. So why not do that and go ahead and try to fill that niche,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so, what was the process like for you building your practice?
It was nerve-wracking at first because there aren't a lot of therapists who disclose their orientations. There's this very long-standing tradition among therapists that, and this goes back to psychoanalysis and Freud and, is that a therapist needs to be a blank slate and really just be this sort of person that the client they're working with can project absolutely anything on them. But that is really a fallacy. That is not something that can exist, because even if you never say anything about yourself, you're presenting yourself in a certain way. It's impossible for a human to be absolutely neutral. So that's one thing. You can't do it anyway. But the other thing is in the kind of work that I do, I don't think that's helpful. So I feel like the work I do is about, it's our relationship and I'm being real and, hopefully that gains someone's trust and, they understand where I'm coming from. They know that I have a working knowledge of the lifestyles or, the things that they're going to be telling me about. At the same time, I don't want to make assumptions about what they're telling me. I don't want to say, my definition of what, for example, kink is the same as theirs is. I want to know what their experience is, but they're not going to have to define every single thing or brace themselves for me saying like, well, is that safe or are you okay? You know what I'm saying? So I kind of went off track there, but I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm just thinking because we talked before we started the conversation and I said, are you comfortable sharing personal information about, right. if I ask you about personal stuff and it is, it's a fine line, right? You're in a position where you've got to be mindful about what you share because you do work with people on a really deep, intimate level. Mm-hmm. So, right. Yeah, what's that like? So I, so the things that I do share are that I'm kink identified, I'm poly identified, I'm queer identified, and I'm also gender fluid, and this just allows people to kind of, and also that I'm a former sex worker. So a lot of people have sort of a combination of these identifications and they seek me out because I'm saying this. And they're like, I just don't want to have to think about my therapist, whether or not it's going to be an issue. Like, I know it's going to be okay. And a lot of times people just want to know that they can talk about things and not have to worry about that. But, people don't often ask me more personal questions than that. Because really they're here for them. They understand. And, if it does come up, I'll say, we're here for you. This is not about me. I'm here in the room, we're two people in the room. So, to that extent, I'm here, but this is about what they need. And so knowing personal details about my life,
could actually end up detracting. It could distract the conversation, or it could change, something about the way they feel they want to talk to me about things. If that happens, it's a good thing to talk about in therapy, but it's usually not so much an issue, and people don't, they're here to talk about their things that they want to talk about. It's not about me, so it doesn't really come up that often. Mm-hmm. But in the beginning, I was nervous about it. I said, I want to do this. Not too many people are doing it. I got support from colleagues, from my own therapist, saying like, that's great. That's going to work out great. That's going to be fine. And that's part of why I started Manhattan Alternative. It's just a website I put together when I started practicing at first.
Cool.
To gather community around me, other people, other therapists and healthcare providers and people that I knew were connected in similar ways for the most part to communities. And, so that we could have a network of people and we could all sort of support each other and then be a resource for clients to refer other clients to. So that was part of the reason why I did that, was not only to help support the community, because I can't work with everyone. And there's people that are friends of mine or that I'm too closely connected to in the community that I shouldn't work with, because that creates a conflict of interest, a dual relationship. So that I want to have someone I trust to refer them to. So, but anyway, it was a little nerve-wracking at first, but right away, it just felt, I knew it was the right thing, and I got so much good feedback, and there was a lot of word of mouth in the community, and people would come to me that way. So that worked out, and it's working out pretty well.
That's awesome. I love it. I can feel I can feel just the energy around it, and it feels really powerful and big, and like it's growing. I can sense into that. And it's great. The ManhattanAlternative.com is a place that it's like curated, right? So it's like, these are people, we are all in agreement that these are people that are safe to work with in this space.
Yeah, I mean, and not everyone's going to be a good match.
Sure.
And I don't know all of these people personally. I screen everyone, but, it's a stringent screening process, but I'm fallible, and, people need to make their own decisions. But for the most part, there are reasons why people are listed,
Yeah.
And you can,
That's great.
And it's not a profit. It's not for profit. People don't pay to be on there. I don't charge anything. It's just a thing that's out there.
Yeah, cool. No, and I love that. And I'm curious about some of these other projects that you've launched and your why behind them. So talk to us a little bit about Kink Doctor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have been thinking about this project for, since I started my PhD, so a few years, I guess it's been a few years now, maybe since before then, since I knew that I was going to get a doctorate, and have been specializing and knew that I would work as a therapist with the kink community and be open about that, and wanting to provide a broader source of support really for the community. And also, we talk about this a lot at the Alt-Sex conference, Alt-Sex NYC conference, about how the reason for that as well is that there are so many misconceptions out there in the world about alternative sexualities, whether it's kink or alternative lifestyles or relationship structures. And so it's really important to get this information out on a broader scale, right? And so the conference is it's educational, and it's primarily for clinicians, but community and students are also welcome. And we get a really nice, diverse mix of discussion in there. And so Kink Doctor is a show that I wanted to do along those lines, to kind of try to reach a broader audience and really just to have a quote unquote normal conversation about kink and about real people's lives, what people actually do, and not these kind of titillating, racy, scary, weird, whatever conceptions people have about kink, but actually and who these people are, what do they look like, or who they are. You don't know, because they're everyone.
Yeah.
It's just the same as anyone else. But this happens to be their sexual preference or something they like to do, or, and so I really wanted to help represent kind of the real faces of, kinky people, like who's out there. And so I'm there as an out person who's kinky. And then my co-host is Bastard Keith, is his performer name. And I've known him for many years, and we have, friends and people in common. And, and he is an out submissive male, and he's a wonderful performer, and he's hilarious, and he's just he makes a good straight man I'm the straight man. That's right. He's like my sidekick. He's just really funny. And so we banter really well together. And I just, from immediately, when I started thinking about the show, I wanted him to be on the show with me. And then we have several guests lined up, all that are willing to be out. I mean, they don't necessarily have to use their legal name, but their face is there and they're talking about their lives. Mm-hmm. And, we started out with a professional Dominadia Dynasty, who is a friend of mine, actually. And since I'm a former sex worker, that it made a lot of sense to kind of talk about that and where sex work and therapy are similar and where they're not, and things like that. It was interesting question. So. Oh,
that's interesting. So yeah. I love that. So can you just give us like a spectrum of kink? Because I feel like the word is out there, but if you're not really familiar with the space, like you might be into kink and you don't even know it, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And which is what happened to me, in my early 20s. I didn't know. I thought, this is stuff I'm doing, and it's surprising me and some other people sometimes. And so maybe I better think more carefully about it. But yeah, I mean, and I was on a panel actually at BAM the other night, asked to sit on a panel of sexperts before this sex positive opera. And that was one of the questions they asked me, if I could, because the audience maybe wouldn't know what BDSM was even. And so BDSM is bondage and domination, dominance, submission, sadism, masochism, or sadomasochism. And there's overlapping letters that are the acronym. But I really use the term interchangeably with kink. And, there are different views on this, but I use kink as shorthand for BDSM, but also to include that there are things like fetishes and role plays that are in as well, that kind of are encompassed by the term as well, kink and BDSM. So that could be pain play, like impact play, people using implements on other people for intense sensations. Could be completely psychological and verbal, where there's maybe humiliation involved, or could be power exchange. There's often power exchange where someone is dominant, someone is submissive, but this is an exchange and it's an agreement that people have. It's not just that, I'm dominant, I'm going to tell you what to do, and you're submissive, so you have to listen. It's actually, everyone has peers, and, you communicate, you negotiate, you agree on these things, you get very explicit consent. Ideally, like that's how it works with BDSM. It has to be consensual, or it's something else. It's not BDSM. It's not kink. And so, but, some people don't use safe words. I think it's a good idea to use safe words, but some people who know each other really well and are able to communicate really well during the scene, that's communication is another way to stop a scene or change a scene. So, and then there's the notion of aftercare, which kind of is a check-in after taking care of each other afterwards to kind of return back to your baseline, because there can be some intense things that happen, or just, you're tired and you're feeling vulnerable, or you're hungry, or whatever it is. That's sort of some of the broad strokes there.
So
unintended.
Yeah. Well, I was always curious. I mean, I'm total like novice in this world. And I went to the Fulton Street Fair in San Francisco last fall. And I mean, I've been aware of kink and BDSM, for years, but not really that exposed to it. I'd certainly never seen it live and direct. Like I saw it on the hot streets of San Francisco. Like it was really hot that weekend. And I was so fascinated by this community. I mean, there were thousands of people there. And it was like, first of all, for me, I'm thinking, how courageous is this? Like to be so out, about your sexuality in this way. And because anyways, I've had this thing that in my life where I've been like, I'm, concerned about what people think about me. Right. So I was just witnessing some of the play that was happening like live out on the street, and just seeing the physical impact of it, like, asses that were like beet red or even bleeding a little bit. And like, and I thought like, gosh, I wonder what that self-care part is like, because there's this experience that I have when I'm so in the energy of the turn on. And then once that passes, it's like a whole different me is present. So I like that you brought up that aspect of like, once you go through that experience, then there's the part afterwards where there is that self-care aspect and just sort of like coming into your, I forgot how you put it, but into like your baseline.
Back to baseline, is how I think about it. A lot of things can happen during a scene, and I don't know about your experience, but that's pretty common. And there is some research out there that talks about bonding between people who have been in a scene. I think it was Brad Sagarin did a study a while back about that, and found that there was an increase in intimacy and bonding that happens through that process. And so afterward and during aftercare is kind of when you get closure and you find out, that there is some bonding that has happened, and you kind of take care of each other. Whoever, it could be the top that needs more aftercare. Often it's the bottom,
Yeah.
Often it's the submissive person or the bottom that needs aftercare, but the top can also need aftercare because there are physiological and chemical changes and psychological changes that happen. And it's great if it can happen at the same time, if people can take care of each other at the same time, but oftentimes it's trading off, and sometimes people don't need that at all. They just literally just want to then Netflix and chill or whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
But grab a sandwich. But sometimes you've been exploring some taboo areas, and even people that are super, accepting of their own sexuality and cool with it, they might have some thoughts after, like, wow, I just did this really intense scene, and in the back of their mind, it might come up for them that somebody else, if they knew about it, would think certain thoughts about it that weren't positive. And, maybe that's something that they have to grapple with also. Mm-hmm. Those are oftentimes the sort of subconscious things that will come up. But yeah, oftentimes it's really just like making sure you're hydrated, making sure that, you're comfortable, all of that stuff. And a lot of it's about bonding between the people that were involved.
Yeah, well, it seems like a really powerful bonding experience. And so if someone were interested in getting into this world a little bit more, dipping their toe in the water, I know we're here in New York City, but what might be a good place to start, or a good way to kind of just get into this world a little bit and learn more about it, learn more about ourselves through more of a kink or BDSM experience?
Mm-hmm. Well, it can be tough depending on where you are, especially if you're in a more rural area, or, you're just not sure what's around. So I guess online is where a lot of people go, even if they are in a bigger city, but they're nervous to talk to people about it because they don't know. Maybe they're not sure if they have friends that would understand, or if maybe they don't feel comfortable talking to anyone about it. So the internet is a way to be a little bit more anonymous and to do some research in that way. And then of course there's FetLife, which you can get on. And sometimes people ask me that. I did a consent talk at a party this weekend. It was kind of a busy weekend, but this was a different talk that I did. And someone came up after me and asked the exact same question. And I said, you can get on FetLife, and you don't even have to put your picture or any information in your profile. It's kind of like Facebook for the kink community, but you don't have to have any information on there, but you can sign up. And the benefit of just having an account or a profile on there, and it's free, is that then you can search events near you. And so you have your zip code in there, and you go to a place where it says events near me, and you look in that listing. And maybe, hopefully there will be something where if you want to go and meet people and talk to them, maybe you can go to a munch. And a munch is like it's eating with people. It's eating with kinky people. And, maybe people are going to talk about their kink lives somewhat, to some extent, but it's not necessarily about playing. It's not a scene or anything. It's just casual hanging out and eating with people that you maybe hopefully can feel more comfortable with, or it's a way to start networking. And then it lists different kinds of events and parties. And then also you can search by keyword if you have a particular interest and you want to get on a chat, just an online chat about it. They have groups and they do discussions on there. So I think that's a good way to learn about or to connect with people. And then there's if you want to actually learn some skills or to learn what something is, you can go to a place there's kinkacademy.com, I think it is. And that you have to pay for that. I don't know if it's a membership or something, but that's a good way to learn stuff. And then, also porn, I'm a person who feels like if you, especially if you do it intentionally and with, some thought around it, you can find porn that, can teach you some things or give you an idea of what your interests are. And it can be an entry or place to start. I know that the topic of porn is controversial for a lot of people, but porn can actually be a way. It really depends on the type of person. There's been research out there about porn being a way for people to feel validated. Like, because there's every kind of porn out there, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe a lot of times people who are afraid to talk to anyone about it or, about their sexual desires will see it and see someone else doing it and feel validated. Like, oh, I'm not the only person on this planet that's into this thing or has thought about this thing before. So that can be a really validating, empowering experience.
Totally.
I mean, porn can be problematic when it acts as a way to be isolated and you're like, I'm never going to actually meet with a person. But then again, some people, that's their sexuality. They don't want to meet with people. And I think that's okay too. So, we could go down the rabbit hole with that one. So I'll stop there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's the point of knowing you're not alone, like knowing that you're most likely not the only person who's either thinking that thing or has tried that thing or has, and I know in my own journey, just like the more that I open up and the more that I'm talking with people about my own experiences, my own sexuality, it's like, I'm just realizing that, oh my God, like how silly, like I was in my head about this all this time. And this is actually quite a common experience once you start talking to other people about it, whatever it is from my own experience that I'm, so it's powerful to connect with others and just know that you're not alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay. And then just share briefly just about your the alt sex NYC, the conference. What was kind of the, impetus to launch that project? And
well, there hasn't been anything like that on the East Coast in New York City, and New York City has such a great alternative sexuality community, or like different communities. There's so many different kinds of people here, but there wasn't any sort of resource like that. And there are also so many therapists here in New York. I don't know if you knew that. But it's one of those true cliche stereotypes that there are just a lot of people here. So it's really was needed.
Because New Yorkers need it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But I mean, for whatever reason. And so there's just a lot of people here. So, per capita. But anyway, yeah. And there is a conference that is run by CARIS, that is the Consortium for Academic Research on Alternative Sexuality they were in San Francisco, but maybe also in Chicago. They might be in Chicago now. But they were running a conference and they were going to do one on the East Coast, but it sort of didn't work out that way. So, rather than miss the opportunity, this is how Michael Aaron and I had asked him to be on Manhattan Alternative as one in the network of providers. So we knew each other already, and we just said, we talked about it, and we said, we need to put this together for the communities and for the clinicians, and this is something that we need here. We didn't want to let that slide and let the opportunity pass. So whenever this was now, like 3 years ago or something, we agreed to work together on that, and so we co-organized and co-produced the first one 2 years ago, and it was just very successful. So many people came out and wanted to hear about these things. And our topics were all of the communities that we've been talking about: kink community and consensual non-monogamy and trans identified people. And, and this year was the second annual in April. And we had some really interesting talks on, like, someone spoke about fetishistic vampirism. So, vampirism as a fetish. And we had a speaker on furries. And
okay, furries. What is that?
Well, and it was such an interesting talk because he got into sort of the different expressions of it, but he talked a lot about the furry fandom, and then the overlap with cosplay, which is like wearing costumes, but it's not the same thing. And so, furries, are people that and for some people, it's more of an identity, really. He really talked about it as an identity, as sort of like this sort of animal or character, and then maybe it's not. Maybe it's sort of a more fantasy based creature. It could be almost anything that someone identifies as or feels comfortable representing themselves as, and they maybe wear certain things, or maybe it's an online presence, or they get together with people. And for some people, it's not a sexual thing. It's purely an identity thing, and that's how they feel comfortable expressing themselves. And for other people, it is sexual. But yeah, it was super interesting. But yeah, we get a lot. We really try to reach out to people who are specialists in these niche areas, because, we don't get to hear a lot, especially from the academic side. And these are usually people that are also involved in those communities. Mm-hmm. So it's a really good conference. It's really fun. We get a lot of discussion going with the audience, with the people attending. And we also had we had a sponsor this year of professional cuddlers. So
nice.
that was fun to hear about that.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I'm going to have to attend next year. I'm sorry that I missed it this year. It sounds amazing. And, this is really cool. I'm just super excited to have you on the show and just be able to share your insights, your experience with our community at Ignite Intimacy. There's like so many more things that we could talk about, but what are the main ways that people can find you online?
So let's see, on the internet, I have a few different, social media monikers and profiles, but I think the easiest one to spell and remember is Kink Doctor right now. So it's just at Kink Doctor. If people do search for at Kink Doctor, you would find that. And it's on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Tumblr now.
Great.
And I think that there are links on there to my practice. My practice website is dulcineapitagora.com.
Great.
Which has a lot of letters in it, but if you find a link, then you just have to click it and you don't have to type it out.
Exactly. Yeah. And we'll have all the links in the show notes as well. So cool. So Kink Doctor, so dulcineapitagora.com, so I'll spell it out. DULCINEA, P as in Pitagora, ITAGORA.com. It'll be in the show notes. KinkDoctor.com. So KinkDoctor.com. If you're in Manhattan and you're coming to Manhattan, or you're moving to Manhattan and you want to find a sex positive psychologist or other type of support in the space, check out manhattanalternative.com. And again, all these links will be in the show notes. We'll include the altsexnycconference.org and also sexualityspeakerseries.org. Dulcinea, you are a force to be reckoned with. Oh my gosh.
Thanks.
So yeah, this has been awesome. And I look forward to seeing you, in and around New York, and just so grateful to share you with our community at Ignite Intimacy today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, Ignite Intimacy, you heard it. Dulcinea, she's a powerhouse. You got to check her out. So super stoked, super grateful. And until the next one, stay blessed. All right. Ciao for now. Give thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out online at igniteintimacy.com and subscribe to us on iTunes. Also, tell your friends all about it. This beautiful music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey, and this podcast is produced by yours truly, Miss La. Give thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.